Welcome to Uxbridge Beat, the podcast where we feature the who's who of Uxbridge, Ontario. My name is Jennifer Neville-Campsell.
And I'm Scott Campsell, and today we are happy to share with you our chat with Gerri Lynne O'Connor.
Gerri Lynne has deep roots within our community and has held multiple levels of political responsibility, including councillor, mayor, and regional chairperson.
Where Uxbridge is now as a town and a community is built upon the foundation of the past from where we have come. Gerri Lynne has played an integral part in building that foundation.
Although now retired, she is still passionate and opinionated in all things Uxbridge, and we were so happy to have learned her thoughts on about goings-on past and present.
If you're new to Uxbridge, get ready for a history lesson. If you've lived here for years, we hope you enjoyed this short trip down memory lane with the one and only Gerri Lynne O'Connor.
Welcome, we're so glad you're with us. I feel like I haven't seen you in forever, but are you hiding now that you're not on council? Or?
Oh, no, I'm doing a lot of volunteer work because it's very much needed, and doing some hobbies that I didn't have time to do when I was working, such as quilting, and belong to a group at the Presbyterian Church called Knit and Natter, where we knit mitts and hats and scarves for the food bank. And we're now looking at doing lap quilts and things for the nursing homes. So, yeah, I try and keep myself busy.
And if we rewind back to the beginning of your political career, 1980, is that correct?
That's correct.
So walk us through that timeline.
Actually, I reported for the paper for a few years, and a decision that the council made, the previous council to 1980 made, that I was I was aghast that they would make it, because it could have brought in $1 million to the township through gravel royalties. They turned it down and it went to court, and as we all know, the John B. Regan pit proceeded, and we lost that ability to collect that royalty. So that was the beginning, and I ran in Ward 5, which I wasn't living in at the time, but I knew that section of town very well, and I ran against 3 men, and 33 years later.
So when you live in one particular ward, any ward is open to run?
You can run anywhere in the municipality as long as you're a taxpayer or a resident.
Interesting fun fact I didn't know.
So are there any wards that you'd look at now and say, I wish I had that ward as opposed to Ward 5? Or maybe back then?
If I was to run again, I'd probably run in my own ward, but that comes after being on council for for many years, and knowing what's going on in my own ward.
What is your ward now?
My ward's Ward 4.
Did you have political aspirations or training or anything leading up to you running as councillor?
Other than reporting council for the paper, which gave me a pretty solid understanding. No, but then my brother and I grew up in a family that owned the newspaper. And so politics was always something that was talked about around the table, and how if you want something from your community, you better be prepared to give something back to your community. That sort of discussions took place. So no, as far as I said, it was just that one decision, and I thought, how stupid can you get? But anyway, it turned out great, and no regrets.
How'd you jump from ward councillor to mayor?
I was going through a divorce when I ran in 1980. And in 1982, the position for regional councillor came up. And back in 1980, it was a 2-year term. In 1982, the provincial government changed it to a 3-year term. So in 82, I ran as regional councillor against the incumbent, and was warned by my fellow councillors that I'd never be able to beat him because he was a farmer, he was well established in the community, and I thought, well, you know what, I need more money than what I'm making as a councillor, and I really like this line of work, so I'm going to try it, and if I am successful, great, but if I'm not, then I have to move on. So anyway, I doubled his vote.
Wow.
And then in 1985, I was acclaimed as mayor.
Why do you think you were so successful doubling a vote like that? What separated you from him?
I don't really know, other than maybe my age at that time. He wasn't old by any means, but he was a fair bit older than me. I'd done a lot of work with minor hockey. In 1979, I'd organized the minor hockey midget team to go to Denmark I was fairly well known in the community. And I think probably my age, my gender might have helped. You know, sometimes your gender can be a detriment, but in that case, I often wondered if it didn't help me.
That's very interesting, because that was definitely going to be one of my questions about did you feel like you had to break any glass ceilings as a woman in politics?
I was the first female mayor in Durham Region, so I sat on a committee with 7 men. The first couple of months, it was a bit of a challenge because I was a woman and they'd never had a woman sit at the table. But I think after a couple of meetings, they found out just because I wear a skirt doesn't mean that I'm any different than them. My thought process was equal or better than theirs in some instances. And I never let them in any way beat me down.
Can you think of anything where you say sometimes it was better? So what would have made it better? Was there any examples that you can give where you'd say, yeah, a woman definitely made that decision and that helped?
Women think a lot differently than men.
I know that. I'm married. But
I think that, you know what, when they realized that I was bringing a different aspect or a different angle to a or to a problem maybe, or to a situation, it opened their eyes. As I said, I think part of it was that I'm fairly strong and they knew they weren't going to beat me down. And so it was either join me or...
And that says a lot especially for the time period, because things were a lot different. But back then, even as far as how men handled relationships with women professionally.
But you're a self-proclaimed hard-nosed bitch.
Oh, yes.
That was the quote in the paper.
Yeah. Well, and you know where that came from? And I can't tell you the year because I've told myself it's not important anymore. But Joe Tannenbaum owned the property at the 6th concession on Highway 47. And he was going to put in 750 homes with a promise that he'd bring Durham College here, or a campus of Durham College. And I fought that tooth and nail with the support of the town. We had public meetings and the arena was full with people backing council's decision to fight it. And my whole thing, even to today, it was probably one of the hardest fights, but one of the proudest ones I had, because if you see what's going on in Stouffville, in Markham, you can't tell we're one of those cities, or city of Markham, it's still known as the town, but it's basically a small city, and Stouffville stops and ends. And that's because they got hooked up to the Durham York sewage plant. And I understand why. I mean, the Tannenbaum would have had to bring that in order to service that property. So if he brought that in, there would have been growth from Stouffville to Goodwood and beyond, because the cost of that infrastructure. So
you don't think there would have been a benefit of having him put in the 750 homes, bring the college here? Because he was talking about, was it the symphony, or there was...
That was all, you know what? And he brought the symphony to his place, and we all sat on a bank, grass bank, and listened to it, and it was nice. But you know what? You can't bribe a town like that. And I mean, I've lived here basically all my life. I did not want to see us go in the direction that even Stouffville and Markham were going at that time. And when we came here, when my parents bought the Times Journal here in 1952, we were larger than Markham and Stouffville and Unionville and Port Perry. And now you can fit us in a corner of some of those places. And I never envisioned Uxbridge. I mean, I think our countryside is amazing. We've got to have land to feed farmers. The farmers have to have land in order to feed us. I don't want to destroy what we've got for the sake of some builder getting mega dollars. But to get back to your question of being a bitch, Kathy and Mark Christoph went down to see him sometime after that decision was made, and he referred to me as that. And Kathy, not Kathy as much as Mark, every time I see him and I mention Tannenbaum, yeah, he likes you, you're a bitch.
So what would be the difference between Joey Tannenbaum, maybe it's the amount of houses, but then somebody like Gino Testa, who put up...
The infrastructure was there.
Okay.
Could be hooked into. But, I mean, it took Gino how many years to develop out that little section of town. And just to plop there's probably more, that would be more houses than what was in the town at that time.
Because that seems to be a big argument. Like if you get on the Facebook groups, and there's one post that comes up all the time, is that the town's growing so much, and this is, and I'm sitting here as a person who was born in this town, and go, I was here first.
At you, I don't think you remember that.
But I think it's funny. You can see somebody who moved in here like 12 years ago, and they're all talking about how the town's exploding and it's all big, and I'm sitting here, at 51, and I'm going, yeah, I was here before you. Like you didn't want to see how we're like.
Yeah, and she's got several decades on you.
Yeah. Where I think that it's funny that somebody would go and complain about how big the town's growing, and meanwhile we've seen nothing.
You know what? The saving grace for us, and they even said it. I was at a meeting at the region because I sit on still a committee there representing the town, which the town was very nice to appoint me to keep my mind going and keep my interest. And they said Uxbridge is going to be a real challenge in the future because of our ability to get rid of wastewater. And I think that, you know what, I look at that and say, thank you, God.
And we're full of crap, basically.
It's the stream that won't take it to Lake Simcoe.
So we're all proud we're full of crap.
Yeah.
As working at a regional level, how do you think your influence or your presence at that level specifically helped or hindered Uxbridge?
Well, I was the chair of planning at the region for over 25 years. So it gave me the ability, through that period of time, we did 2 regional official plans, redid them. And I had to go out to all 8 municipalities with the planning department to present the changes that we were proposing, or that they were proposing. And it gave me a really good understanding of what other towns have and what they're facing, and maybe gave me a heads up for things to be aware of here. I mean, I was very, very fortunate, first of all, to last that long, but to be able to stay in that position at the region, because you're appointed at that time by your peers. And I gained a lot of experience that when I was dealing with developers here, I could sort of figure out what they were doing or what they were doing and maybe weren't telling me, and had to deal with all kinds of developers at the regional level. So yeah, it really helped.
What do you think one of your biggest in-council fights would have been?
The dirtiest fight, the dirtiest public meeting I ever had, and we had it at the music hall, was when we put in the nonprofit housing on Reach Street. And to this day, it still shocks me, it still upsets me when people I knew and grew up with would stand up in a public meeting and say, I don't want my kids dealing with the kids that are going to be living in there. Just to think that you would say you didn't want your kids playing with other kids that weren't as fortunate, that still bothers me.
What finally pushed it through?
Council.
But it was just a really bad fight.
It was a bad fight, yeah. The other one was more recent, was when we wanted to the region wanted to put up an antenna at Quaker Hill at the museum for have better internet service. And I was accused of trying to kill their kids because of the waves that would be coming off of that. And that was another public meeting. And one of the people that stood up and said, you're going to hurt our kids and you don't care about our kids, and there's a school there. Well, my granddaughter was going to school there. I'm not going to let anything happen to her. I'm not going to let anything happen to anybody if I have some control over it. And the person that was really berating me, his father is a dentist who sticks X-ray machines in people's mouth daily. Like, where the hell, excuse my French, do you think those waves are coming from?
Yeah, and a lot of that would have been just ignorance as to not know.
It was total ignorance, and it was set up by a few paranoid people that didn't care about facts. Anyway, we did get it moved down to the 7th concession and Regional Road 21, which might be a better place for it. But to hear the abuse that came out of people at that was the other really bad meeting.
How do you handle that? One of the things we talk about over and over again is how out in social media Dave Barton is. And it seems like every time there's something wrong, including power outages or it's raining, it must be Dave Barton's fault. So did you ever have to, like, obviously there wasn't such a huge, strong social media presence, but did you ever have to deal with something like that?
I think where Dave and I differ is, first of all, I was not on social media. It was just really, when I left, it was just really coming to sort of a peak. But people would come in and they'd sit and face me, which I much rather have, because you can hear their side of the story and then you can say, okay, I understand. Now can I tell you my side of the story? And usually, we both can get up from our seats and say, okay, I have a better understanding where you're coming from. And it's settled. But I see those posts that Dave go through and I think, not a chance in hell I'd put up with that.
His skin is remarkably thick. Because I feel the same way. If I was subjected to that kind of daily...
But what makes people think they're entitled to do that?
Because they're a taxpayer, because they're a keyboard warrior who just wants to put it out there and think they know all the answers, I guess.
The one thing when we did the interview with him last year that he said that sort of made sense, where you're saying you sat down with this one person and you had that one conversation, which may have been good, but then how many other times do you have to have that same conversation? So what he said was, it was nice that he could post a comment and then more people would read it.
You know what? And that's the benefit of social media. But as I said, because of the timing, it was just really starting where a municipality would go out and do that. And Dave was very much more involved in social media, computers and that sort of thing than I was. So in his case, I think it's working for him. He's taking more abuse maybe. But I just look at some of those things and just say, grow up.
So did you ever have a moment where you should have bit your tongue, but you stepped out because you were just so upset by somebody coming at you in those instances?
You mean one-on-one? No, not necessarily. The only time that I got really, really angry in council was a developer from Stouffville called me a racist. And I got out of my seat and went after him. Luckily, I'd never touched him, but I was furious, because he was playing the racist card.
Every once in a while, you still get called out, though, on social media, though. Or usually when it has to do with the pond, or like I've seen that kind of stuff where they talk about...
what should have been done.
Yeah.
Where I don't follow it.
Well, I guess when we talk about things moving forward, and a lot of the older residents will say, well, the town council from blah, blah, blah didn't do what they should have done. And so therefore now we're picking up the pieces.
Well, you know what? I can't answer that because I don't really know what they're referring to. But I mean, in the past, I've seen a few things about we should be able to swim in the pond. Yeah, if you want to swim in goose shit, go ahead. When I took swimming lessons there was no geese, there was no ducks. It was really extremely cold and it was spring fed. And we didn't have the development around it with rainwater and water coming off roads and that sort of thing. But also people forget that we have no control over the pond. The pond falls under the Ministry of Fisheries and Oceans and Fisheries. And we have to go through, or the municipality has to go through a whole process to do anything with that water in that pond. The worst thing that happened was when conservation, through a Ministry of Natural Resources, said we had to close we had to open the bottom draw. So what that did is it took all the cold water out of the pond and left warm water. So naturally weeds are going to grow. But that was a ruling from the ministry, and it came down, and the reason for it was that the fish and the wildlife that the water goes through going up to Uxbridge Brook required it. The other stupid thing was when we built the Elgin Park Drive, we had to have engineers tell us where to put the stones so that the fish could get through. I just about croaked on that one. I said, do they have a map? Yeah.
What do you mean where the stones were?
We had engineered stones that they placed in that waterway.
Oh, so they could figure out how to, okay.
And there,
Now I understand.
and there isn't
Dumb as a
even
fish, huh?
any water in the detention pond that's there now. To me, common sense has gone by the wayside. We've got a pond, Bass Pond, on the 7th at Elgin Park Drive, that is virtually drying up. And why is it? Because there's a hole in the intake pipe. Council, not my council, but Dave's council, looked at it, and they wanted $80,000 to $100,000 in engineering to look at it.
Just to look at it.
I said, go ask a farmer and he'll have it fixed in 10 minutes. But that's how crazy it is. You have to have engineering drawings or drawings that are stamped for everything council does. And their hands are tied.
So something like that, you can see that you're obviously paying attention to what's going on still. You're still forming opinions in the background. Would that be the only thing that you can sit back now and look around town and go, that'd be the thing I'd fix if I was still mayor? Or are there other things?
Well, that was one thing that I'd certainly, and I've talked to councillors, my own councillor, Willie Pop, on that. I've talked to councillors on a few matters as a resident, not as the former mayor, but somebody that lives here and cares deeply about the town. And I can only make suggestions. If they want to act on them, that's up to them. If they don't want to, that's their choice.
Do you ever act as an advisor sometimes? They ask you, how am I handle this? Or do you have any?
No.
Is that your choice or is that theirs?
I think it's theirs.
Yeah.
I would gladly help them because I've got a lot of background information, but I also know and appreciate the fact that they want to go their route. They don't necessarily want to go down the same route or the same road as I did. I totally understand that.
What do you see that this council may have done, or is there anything that you can see where you can say they did that really well and you probably would have done the same thing, or maybe they did it even better than what you would have handled it?
You know what? To be fair, they've had 3 years of COVID. They haven't been able to do a lot or take on any big project. I think the biggest thing that they've taken on, and I can't say that I agree with it, was the public information and asking for public input into what was going to happen at Circle K. Or is it
For the town square,
Right.
or however that's going to...
Right. And most letters to the editor that I read, and some of the stuff that I read on social media, but again, I don't get on there very often because that isn't my thing, was that we want a town center, like we want green space. And I wrote in my submission to them that I thought that they should go to Lindsay and look what Lindsay was able to do a number of years ago. They've got a beautiful town center with benches and, big mature trees now, and it's like a gathering place for people. And I said that would be so perfect for us. Anyway, when council came out and they said they were going to redevelop it, there'd be a small parkette there. Well, that doesn't cut it for me, but I'm not in the position to, I'm only one resident, and I accept that they're in the position of power to make those decisions. I can only voice but that's the only thing that has really quite concerned me, that we have one opportunity with that property, and let's do the best thing that we can for it. They talked about bringing more people downtown. Well, with the tragic circumstances of the tornado going through, Trinity United Church now is going to be doing a pretty massive housing development, basically rent to income, which is badly needed. So there will be a lot of people brought in through that into the downtown core. As I said, I don't want to be critical of council because they have a lot more information than we see as a public to work with than we're aware of. As I said, that's the only thing that I really hope that we can change their mind before anything like a shovel goes into the ground.
Common question we get at Okamikai Martial Arts and Fitness is, what age can my child start karate?
And the answer is that we have children as young as 3 years old training with us. Austin is one of our amazing students, and he told us some of his favorite things about our program.
Do lots of stuff like karate, like weight falls, kicks, and blocks, and punches. I can do anything.
Austin can do anything, and we are excited to help bring out his potential and your child's too.
We use martial arts as a tool to help your child build confidence, focus, self-discipline, and respect for others.
Contact us at Okamikai Martial Arts and Fitness to get your child started today.
Mom, wake up, it's karate day!
How did you balance it all with a busy political career? You had kids,
Two children,
and
yeah.
you said you had a grandchild as well. And how did you balance all that?
Well, I was a single mom. My kids were 5 and 7, and it was hard, very hard. I missed many birthdays, many events that I would have loved to have been, but being on council was my source of income. I made a commitment to the people when they voted to me that I would do the job to the best of my ability, and I was able to get through it. Wasn't able to do some of the things that I'm doing now for myself that I really enjoy, but still hopefully I'll have.
You got a bucket list? Is there anything else?
I'm in my 80th year. I need to. I better not have too much on my bucket.
We're going to do some rapid fire. You don't need to answer quickly. You can take your time. If there's a more elaborate answer you need to provide, but otherwise, cats or dogs?
Both.
Winter or summer?
Winter.
What's your favorite restaurant currently in Uxbridge?
Navarre's.
What's your secret vice? I guess it's not very secret if you share it, but
Be true to yourself. Treat others like you want to be treated.
well, that's your advice. But what's your secret vice? What do you turn to that, is it chocolate? Is it chips? Is it?
Oh,
yeah.
Pepsi.
Pepsi. Really? Pepsi?
Yeah.
What's your favorite breakfast?
Scrambled eggs on toast with bacon.
And your favorite breakfast place in town?
Is Navarro's.
Navarre's.
Yeah. Pay attention.
But she could have had a different breakfast place. Could have been Wimpy's or something. I don't know.
But
it's Navarro's.
Navarre's
Yeah.
for their eggs Benedict, but the B&L breakfast is really good too.
Who is or was your political hero or mentor?
I wouldn't call him a hero. I'd call him my mentor, and his family is like my second family still, is Gerri Lynne, who was our mayor before and was the regional chair before me.
What, maybe one significant job or decision, something like that, what would you say was your proudest moment as mayor?
My proudest moment as mayor. I know there were so many things that I was proud of, but you also have to understand that as mayor, I was only one member of council. Mm-hmm. I had the support of council behind me, or I wouldn't have been able to do anything. I think there's two things that stand out. One was the building of Elgin Park Drive, along with doing all the trails in the park itself, so that people on wheelchairs, they had accessibility to be able to walk and enjoy the park. And the walkway taking from Main Street right through into the park. So that, and by the Elgin Park Drive, it eliminated a lot of the traffic going on Brock Street and on Mill Street. So that was pretty significant. Certainly anything to do with the hospital, expansion of the hospital and that. Yeah, that's two things that I really...
Do you have a regret?
I guess I was a bit disappointed. Well, in two things. I was really disappointed that councils didn't necessarily have the same feeling for heritage that I did. And that's okay. Heritage means a lot to me. And, tried hard to get the museum in a better position over the years, but also when I wasn't able to get council to support me in the designation of the Sam Sharp House. I mean, there's statues sitting in Parliament buildings in Ottawa, and Uxbridge wouldn't designate his house.
Which one was his house?
His house was on First Avenue, and it was the house right on the west side of First Avenue at Dominion Street. It had the big round sunroom that was taken off with the tornado. But I understand that maybe the people there are going to look at redoing it. It's amazing because it had 13 stained glass windows at the top of that sunroom, and they found 12 of them unbroken. But that bothered me, that our history, in designating, doing like a heritage section of our downtown core, where we had control over what people, such as paint. When the place is designated, doesn't mean that you can't do anything with it on the inside. You can do whatever you want on the inside of it. But the outside of the building remains as it was built. And that, if you look at Port Perry, they've got a heritage district, and that's why they were able to maintain their downtown core to the condition it's in, because people bought into it. Council was very supportive of their heritage committee.
Is there a way that you can see that you can balance it, though? Because you're talking about heritage and you're talking about trying to keep the town small and separate. And then meanwhile, somebody like me who's a small business owner, when all of a sudden houses go up, young families come in, they've got kids, now all of a sudden I'm teaching more kids. I can see where there's, we want to keep the integrity of the town, being someone who's lived here, but there's also that business end of things too.
But I think if you look at it, Scott, every corner of this town was built out under me. We didn't try and stop it. The Ewan farm is the Testa subdivision. The Kidd farm is Nell Kidd, basically. Carmody farm is Quaker Village.
So how do you juggle it?
Farm.
How do you juggle it? You've got people that are saying, the town's growing too much. And then you've got other people that are going, well, yeah, but I still need to make money and I need to be able to buy these $1 million homes now, even though they were only a couple $100,000.
Yeah. And you know what? Supply and demand. It's a juggling act. But as I say, the one thing that's going to save us for a while is the fact that we don't have sewage capacity. Now, the alternative to that is if through this Bill 23 that the province has just passed, which I can't believe it. They've taken the ability of people, residents, to have any say in growth whatsoever. They've taken that ability away from us, or from us as residents. But I don't want to see for the environment, I don't want to see private services in either. That's the next thing, is the big subdivision that's in Coppins Corners, that's on private services. They have their own sewage plant, they have their own water system, and they pay for that. Well, you don't want to know what their taxes are or what they're paying for those services. Not to those services, they pay to like a condominium, but to the taxes that they pay, plus
their condo fees.
Yeah, it's exorbitant. But it's also, I don't think poking holes in ground is any way to look at the environment either. It's a really fine juggling act that we're in right now.
If there's one person who is alive currently right now who you'd like to sit down and have a coffee with and pick their brain about stuff, or just have a conversation with, who would it be?
My grandmother.
Is she still alive? No. Oh, well, no, somebody who's still alive.
Oh, somebody's still alive. Oh, God, no, she's 100 years old. Somebody's still alive that I would like to sit down and talk to. Kathleen Wynne.
Why?
I just have a lot of respect for her.
Have you met her?
Yes, I worked with her.
Oh, did you?
Because I belong to the mayor's committee and the GTA, so we met with her. Didn't always agree with her, but she was pretty knowledgeable.
And if there was somebody who has now passed away, it would be your grandmother?
Yeah.
Did you ever really...
wisdom.
For the wisdom? Did you have a really close relationship with her?
Very, very.
And how old were you when she passed away?
Died in 1975, and I was born 44, so 30.
So you had a good long time with her.
Yep.
That's great.
Yeah. Loved her dearly.
When you die and you go to heaven, what do you hope God says to you?
I'll be shoveling coal.
Other than here comes the hard-nosed bitch. What do you hope God says to you?
Welcome.
If you were going to do your own interview on you, what's probably the most interesting thing you could ask yourself? Or like, what would you think that if when you walk away from us, you say, they should ask me this because I really would have liked to talk about that?
It's not as much want to talk about it. I think that people, particularly now, but there was 3 instances that I will go to my grave with of how I was spoken to and letters that were written to me. that were very hurtful. And had really the decision, what they were talking about, had nothing to do with me. It was out of my hands. It was, in 2 cases, it was provincial government. And yeah.
Was it part of why you retired?
No. I was tired. I mean, I lived and breathed that for 33 years. And when my peers at the region, after Roger, that was a very hard time for me, because I'd worked with Roger Anderson, the chair, for a long time, and he was a good friend. And to see him go through what he went through, and then after he died, and my peers said, we'd like you to fill in. It was a unanimous decision of regional council for me to replace him for the rest of his term. And I'd already said then that I wanted out. But I was what, 75 then?
Self-proclaimed hard-nosed bitch, but then there are 3 instances where you've been talked to very poorly that you're going to take to your grave, as you say, so you're definitely still a softie. You're not Teflon.
No, you know what? And he did that. He said that because he couldn't get his way with me. But he didn't see it, and he couldn't see it, that it wasn't me that made the decision not to let him develop here. The people were they were really upset. Like their residents, that whole corner was going to be houses. I mean, they didn't want it. I didn't want it for maybe a different reason than most residents, because I knew what the big pipe was all about. And I mean, that would just be disastrous.
What's your favorite place to visit here in town in the wintertime? You said winter was your favorite over summer. Where do you like to be?
I used to spend hours at the arena. I haven't been at the arena this year yet, but I just like walking. Walking, and it's so peaceful and so clean. Walk around Elgin Park, it's beautiful.
And you said you got those paths paved. That was
all happened, and the exercise things were put in when I was still at mayor.
Yeah.
Now again, I mean, it was staff that came forward and suggested it, and we found the money to do it.
And it's so well utilized every day.
Oh, mm-hmm. And probably one of the better things that we did, because I had nightmares during the fair, and any large event in that park was before we put the pathway in, and they had to walk over that bridge with no sidewalk.
I'd say that over and over again. Every time I'd walk across that bridge, I was like, why can't we widen this? Or
Yeah. And that used to give me heart seizures, almost thinking, oh my God, Mom walking down there with 2 little kids could get hit so fast. Mm-hmm. And I mean, that's what I say, that walkway and Elgin Park Drive, that whole development, because we added a lot of acreage to Elgin Park through the Ketherwood farm. And we're so fortunate to have that beautiful park in the middle of our town.
And I think we've been very fortunate to have you give so many years of service to our town, to our region. I think we're all the better for it.
Yeah, this is the second year we just started doing this podcast. And so there were times last year where I was saying, I was really happy that we were able to interview Dave. I was really happy when we interviewed Melissa, because she's this big popular TikTok superstar now. And so with her audience and our audience, it grew just because of the fact we had her on. But then other situations where we've been able to sit down with people like Andy Malcolm, who even Mayor Dave Barton listens to. He said, I didn't even know this guy was out there. So there's been times where we've been able to look at episodes and go, I'm really glad we're doing this, because
I think it's the service that you're providing is amazing. I mean, there's so much going on in this town that we're not aware of. And the number of people that are in this town that, have made significant contributions to society that we're not aware of, except through things like this.
Well, you've made a huge contribution to this town, so thank you very much.
Well, thank you for sharing your time with us.
Thank you.
Okay, well, here we go, year 2. Did you think we were going to make it this far?
Well, me and you, of course, but the podcast, I was a bit sketchy. I wasn't sure what we were going to do, but I think leading off this year with Gerri Lynne O'Connor is a great start, because it's important to know where we've come from. And you are in a unique position because you grew up here. Your dad's been here for so long, and you have a very let's say, opinionated perspective on where the town has come from and where we are, and perhaps even where we're going. And Gerri Lynne has really shed a light on that. I'm not sure that you agreed with everything she said.
Like what?
Well, maybe specifically the Tannenbaum thing. Where are you at with that?
I was too young.
Really?
Yeah. I when we talk about youth, I was old enough to know sort of what was going on, but I was too young to really have a say or an input. Where she's talking about people getting together and discussing whether they wanted that many homes in town. Like, I was old enough, like I had started Okamikai up by then, but I didn't really have a lot of input. There's conversations that she's talking about that there's sort of this sweet spot of age, right? Like there's this, I don't know, maybe sweet spot isn't the right way to describe it, but you're in high school and you're just trying to make something for yourself. You're just trying to figure out what you're going to do next. And are you going to go to university? Are you going to get a job? Or where are you going? And then when you're in this colleges and careers type place, you're not really an adult, but you're not a kid either. So you like, and I'm watching what Jacob's trying to go through now with his college course, and he's doing fitness and health management or promotion. I should know the official name of this course, but he's got enough information that he's starting to formulate his own opinions, which is good, but he doesn't really have the life background to give good ones.
There we go. And that's bingo. Okay. So it's not just even the life background, it's the perspective and the community background, right? So where we have people who have opinions on what's happening today, they may not necessarily have the life perspective and the history of living here for the last, let's say 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 plus years to be able to know where the town has come from and where we are and where we're going. And Gerri Lynne has that in spades.
But there's also a point where things have to move on. There has to be an evolution. Dave's on social media. That wasn't a thing when she was running for council.
Right. And so I started this outro with asking or suggesting that you didn't necessarily agree with anything. Where are we at with that?
I don't think it's a matter of agreement. Do I agree with what she did back then? I don't know enough about what was involved. And even now, there's times where I can see our councils making decisions and we don't have all the information. But I think it comes down to the same thing. You and I have talked over and over again about people complaining on Facebook groups. And yet, how many of these people go to a town council meeting? So where you're talking about whether I have an opinion or not, I had an opinion enough that I voted in the last election. Is my opinion so convicted that I need to go to a council meeting? I'd rather go teach a class.
And fair enough. And so whether it's the past council, present council, future council, if you live in Uxbridge and you have an opinion and you think your opinion matters, get off Facebook and go to these town council meetings and be a change. If you want to be a change, go be a change.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I think some people don't run is because they're happy. You know, Dave said it when he won the last election. He said he was basically treated this as an endorsement that he was doing the right stuff. And personally, I've had a couple of friends have conversations with me and went, yeah, and he's doing a good job, but also people don't want his job. So there's also that.
Well, fair enough. But if you want to make a change, get in there and make a change. We are so lucky to live in a democracy. We're so lucky to live in a town where we have less than arm's length of a connection with our council. Go and make a difference. We implore you to do that.
But at the same time, there are also Facebook groups that are good. Like, well, I don't know, we've got one. Go on the Uxbridge Beef Facebook group. Don't want to totally slam Facebook.
I'm not trying to slam Facebook. I'm just saying that we have the opportunity in a small town, in a democracy, to go and make a difference. Our town council does such good work. And if nothing else, maybe it would interest somebody to go and be a part of it. Go and make a change. Go and be part of the positive.
Speaking of change, not only do we have a Facebook group, we've also got a brand new website that we've just launched. So if you don't have Apple or Spotify or Google, I don't know how you're listening to us right now, but
YouTube.
You could go YouTube. Yeah, you could go to our website. We are at uxbridgebeat.ca. We decided to go with the .ca because we are very Canadian. You'll see the episodes there. There's also a blog section, so I might end up having to, I don't know, start
An
scribing
opinion
something.
section where you get to spout off
Let's
and
talk about
nobody
Joey
challenges you. Oh no.
Let's talk about Durham College having a campus in town. This has been a Capsule Broadcasting production. Personally, we thought Gerri Lynne had a soft nose.